We all wanted to grow up fast, to skip the awkward years, the rules, the waiting. But what happens when you do? You get an adult on the outside and a child still screaming on the inside that's not prepared for the emotional misery that comes with being an adult. This isn't just a funny cartoon episode about a kid experiencing the greatest pain an adult can suffer: going bald. This is a warning about skipping the stages of life, about what happens when you never truly mature, about the man-child trapped in a grown-up body, still chasing childhood dreams with adult responsibilities he was never ready for. And maybe it's a warning for us too. The episode starts out in Timmy's room, like usual, where Cosmo suddenly blasts him with an alarm as traumatic as the iPhone default sound. Why? Because it's time for school, the thing every kid just loves. Luckily for Timmy, his fairy godparents make things super easy for him, getting him ready, brushing his teeth, and all the normal stuff without him even having to blink. Most would say it's a pretty sweet deal, and Timmy doesn't know how good he has it just yet. Because at school, he doesn't have much to look forward to. Francis bullies him for being a tiny twerp during recess. And his position in football trials is that of the ball. And bro, he doesn't even have a number, just a fraction. The big guys slam him into the ground. And I don't recommend doing this with your little cousins, as at least for me, it was kind of an awkward funeral. From the very beginning of this episode, we see Timmy's disdain for his life as a child, and even more so, a tiny one like himself. Everything about his life, from the need to go to school, to the bullying he faces at the hands of multiple people like Francis, makes Timmy hate being so small. He hates being a kid and not being in control of his own life like he believes most adults to be. And that's part of the problem he, and many of us, have when we were kids. This isn't just about not wanting to be a kid. Heck, it's not even about wanting to grow up exactly. It's about the romanticized view of adulthood and how it prevents one from appreciating the stage of life they're already in. Anyway, little Timmy almost fed up by the time he gets home that night. But hey, even though being a kid is a pain in the ass at school, at least his parents don't treat him any different, right? Well, they're going out for a movie. He's not invited, because it's an adult movie. They emphasize an adult movie. So things must be getting boring in bed and they're trying to spice things up, huh? As if that wasn't already bad enough. They're even leaving him in the tyrannical hands of the babysitter from hell, Vicky. The second they're gone, Vicky's mask of kindness melts back into underworld, and she uses her authority over Timmy to send him straight to bed at 6 p.m. Because why bother about homework and dinner? She probably doesn't get paid enough for that. Up in his room, sick of being short stuff and at everyone else's mercy, Timmy voices his frustration. He can't stand being a kid anymore, starting to daydream about being the ultimate giga chad of an adult. He talks about all the fun he'd have as a grown-up, driving around on his own, helping little old ladies, getting back at Vicky, and more. Because we all know being an adult is all about having no responsibilities and getting to do whatever we want, whenever we want. The perception Timmy has of adulthood is far simplistic and frankly ideal than anyone in real life will tell you it actually is. To a kid, adulthood looks like the ultimate escape. You get to stay up late, watch anything you want, eat dessert for breakfast, no school, no rules. In Timmy's world, being a kid means powerlessness. He's bossed around by adults, ignored by the people who should protect him, and tormented daily by this big. So when he wishes to be an adult, it's not about just the age, it's about control, the fantasy of freedom. So with that in mind, he turns to Cosmo and Wanda for his wish. He wants to be an adult. Unfortunately, it turns out he's not quite the awesome giga chad he thought he'd be after growing up. Instead, he's a bald, fat, gross, middle-aged dude that even the fairies have to ew at.
Ew is right. I don't have any hair.
Sure you do. It's here on your back.
The version of adulthood Timmy imagines doesn't exist. He expects strength, respect, autonomy. What he gets is a short, balding man that nobody recognizes, not even himself. That's because real adulthood doesn't come automatically with power. It comes with responsibility. He takes one look at himself and instantly tries to wish himself a less gross look. As it turns out though, There's some stuff only kids can do, like having their wishes granted by Fairly godparents. There's a not so subtle message in that key element of this episode about how childhood is a time of imagination, endless possibilities, and what truly feels like magic, and a magic that seemingly fades away as we grow up and our childlike wonder and creativity are replaced with rigid responsibility. He's no longer controlled by anyone, but he's no longer cared by anyone. And that's the truth that many of us face in adulthood. No one is going to save you. No fairy godparents. The moment Timmy becomes an adult, Cosmo wants to disappear. Not because they're angry, not because he did something wrong, or because they are disgusted by that disgusting and smelly chimpanzee, but because fairy godparents are only assigned to kids. And just like that, the magic is gone. The world doesn't owe you empathy just because you grew up. This is more than a plot device. It's a metaphor for losing your innocence, your imagination, your emotional safety net. The identity he had, the playful, hopeful, messy kid, is buried beneath a body that doesn't even feel like his. And this isn't just a cartoon exaggeration. So many adults walk through life feeling the same way, disconnected, emotionally stunned, trying to live a life they never prepared for because they never got the chance to actually grow into it. Timmy, however, unwilling to believe that there could possibly be anything bad about being an adult, and since he's ugly but not incapable, he decides to just suck it up and enjoy all the stuff he can do now, even if he's ugly the whole time. Unfortunately, it doesn't take long for the young ugly man to get the mother of all reality checks. First on the list, driving. In the car that he now magically has, since we all know you magically get a car as soon as you become an adult. And as it so happens, driving is pretty fun when you're not stopped in a bumper-to-bumper traffic wasting hours of your life, which is how most driving actually is for adults. Oh, and the car sickness. That sucks too, but Timmy refuses to let that get him down. He just knows that being an adult rule, and there's plenty of other stuff he can still try. Like helping that little old lady for one. Only she doesn't really need help after all. In fact, Timmy's the one who needs help. After the lady pepper sprays him right into the peepers for seeming like a creep. Because yes, he seems to be taken from a list of felons. Still though, Timmy refuses to believe that his wish wasn't a smart one. After all, there's still other things adults can do, like watching grown-up movies kids aren't allowed in. There's a reason those aren't for kids. Timmy might look like an adult now, but he's still a kid inside, so he's just grossed out by what he sees in the movie. Not as grossed out as when he spots his parents a few seats over going at it. Yeah, we can imagine what he saw. Well then, forget the movie. Time for the next thing on the list. Shaving. That's a fun adult thing, right? Not sure how he got to that conclusion, but sure. Again though, he's still a kid inside, which means Timmy doesn't know the first thing about shaving, at least not without ripping off his whole face, and then Cosmo makes it even worse by offering him some cologne to help. Because funny prank, look at his face, he's having a blast. At this point, Timmy has everything he thought he wanted. He's tall, he's technically free, no bedtime, no school, no babysitter, and yet he's miserable. Why? Because when you skip the process of becoming, you end up lost. He's not a kid anymore, so the world stops protecting him. But he's not an adult either, because he doesn't know how to protect himself. That's the emotional cost of skipping growth. You trade support for responsibility without the skills to carry the weight. He heads into what looks like a grown-up restaurant and asks for a grown-up menu, like any self-respected adult would. Fast forward a little while and he's eating a whole feast worth of fancy food. However, being a kid at heart with no concept of how things work as an adult, Timmy's in for what might be his rudest awakening yet, the bane of every independent adult existence. Money. And in this case, the $265 bill. Out of instinct, he goes to say that his parents would handle that, only to come to the realization that that won't happen. He's the adult here, which means he has to pay.
Well, you should have finished college.
Did you finish college?
No!
I love this previous clip because it really shows how growing up doesn't change just the way how others see you. It changes what you are allowed to feel. As a child, you get to be scared, you get to cry, you get to be taken care of. But when Timmy becomes an adult, and even the waiter, the world doesn't check if he's ready. It simply expects him to be ready. That's the silent contract of adulthood. You're on your own. With no money to his name, certainly not enough to pay the triple-figure bill, Tim is sent into the back to clean dishes as a payment. There, as he talks to Cosmo and Wanda, they hammer it home even further that grown-ups have to do everything by themselves, and they don't get to enjoy all the luxuries of life without having to work for every second of them. And I've really been feeling that part lately about being an adult because, let me show you something. So you see all this fucking paper, you see all of this, even this, all of these are fucking bills that I have to pay. Not only I have to pay, which it's a responsibility on itself, like get the money to pay them, it's also I have the responsibility to go and pay them. No one's gonna remind me that I have to pay my bills. Nobody tells me to do that. And also this for example, this fucking paper, this is fucking debt that I owe to the fucking bank. This is what happens when we try to wear adulthood like a costume. We become emotionally fragmented. Adults by age, children by heart, confused by soul. And no one teaches us how to bridge that gap. This episode might be a cartoon wish, but it speaks something painfully real. The quiet suffering of adults who never got to fully live their childhood, who were told to grow up before they were ready, and now don't know how to grow at all. By the time Timmy pays off his bill, he's exhausted and sick of how crummy being an adult is when he hasn't grown into it properly. Without the development and the maturity that get over time and growth, there's not a single thing to appreciate about being big. As if this night wasn't bad enough, Timmy doesn't consider that he's unrecognizable in his current form. So when he gets home and walks right through the front door, Vicky thinks he's some random creep and proceeds to completely mop the floor with him with some sick taekwondo combo. She might be mean, but hey, at least she'll keep you safe. Bummed out and feeling completely defeated, Timmy sadly makes his way to somewhere else to spend the night. Ironically enough, this ends up being the one place he hates, and what made him want to be an adult in the first place: school. Here in the empty football fields, bleachers, he comes to terms with how hard it is to be an adult and settles in for the night, hoping for tomorrow to be better. What happens when someone grows older but never grows up? You get a Marvel Rivals player. No, I'm just kidding. You get the man child. Not just a trope, not just a joke, a cultural phenomenon. Timmy doesn't just act like a child in an adult's body. He is one. Emotionally reactive, dependent on others, avoidant of responsibility, and suddenly this silly cartoon becomes a portrait of something really uncomfortable real. The man-child is born when someone skips the process of emotional growth. They avoid discomfort, delay responsibility, chase freedom without structure, and at first the world lets them, because being funny, carefree, even a little reckless, those are charming when you're young, but time keeps moving and the charm wears off. Just like Timmy, they start to feel it. The world doesn't wait, friends move on, relationships demand depth, work requires discipline, and deep down, most men children aren't lazy, they're just frozen, scared of failing at adulthood, and in so many cases, scared of becoming their own parents. Meanwhile, Vicky realizes Tim isn't home, so she quickly makes it seem like he's already asleep, using a basketball ball. That only works because his loving and caring dad doesn't know what he actually looks like.
Look at that big orange basketball-shaped head of his sleeping. Good night, Timmy.
The next morning, Timmy wakes up to see Francis bullying his friends and finally sees a chance. He can finally do something cool now. Without a second thought, he walks up to Francis, flicks his head and tells him to pick on someone his own size. Thing is though, a whole-grown creepy man hitting a kid is not a good look no matter the context. Which means Timmy now has to run from the cops for being a Minecraft YouTuber. He's barely escaped that disaster when a whole new one reveals itself. A messenger fairy shows up to tell him and his fairies that they are being reassigned since he's not a kid anymore. Worse still, they're going to be sent to what I can only assume is Sid from Toy Story. Luckily for Timmy, there's one part of being an adult that he can use: corruption, namely bribing the messenger to give him a little more time with his fairies. If you want to do this, please don't try this, since $5 doesn't go nearly as far these days as it used to. This is why this episode, The Big Problem, shifts from comedy to tragedy. Not because Timmy becomes an adult, but because he does it without the lessons that make adulthood meaningful. Without support, without identity, without magic. With his fairies about to be taken away, on top of everything else that has gone wrong, Timmy is desperate to fix things and get his real life back. After looking through the fairy rulebook for a loophole, they confirm that Timmy might be able to wish himself back to normal if he can tap into his inner child enough to prove he's not really an adult. Unfortunately, pretty much everything's a bust. Mini Golf just cracks his back, kitty rides crumble under his weight, and it's all making him even more of an adult on the inner kiddo meter.
That's just plain creepy.
As his world comes crumbling down around him, every moment hammers it into Timmy's head just how wrong he was. At this point, we see Timmy's particular case of Peter Pan syndrome shifting to the regular kind. Now that he truly understands what it means to be an adult, there's nothing he wants less. In his failed attempts to enjoy adulthood and his desperation to be a child again, he realizes exactly what he's been taking for granted. In many ways, this desperation he feels mirrors the feelings of actual adults as well, who long for the carefree nature of youth, the time of their life when they felt most free in hindsight. As he wanders through town looking for another way, Timmy runs into Vicky and greets her like they know each other, creeping her out even more than the other night. Naturally, the babysitter hits him with another 3-hit combo and crushes him, allowing the cops from before to finally catch Timmy and arrest him for his predator moves. Because a seemingly middle-aged creep trying to talk to a teenage girl is not really a good look. Behind bars, his fairies are about to leave him, and his one phone call ending with his mom not believing him. Timmy breaks down. When the messenger fairy shows up to take Wanda and Cosmo away, he completely cracks. Brought to hysterical tears, he cries about how he doesn't want to be an adult, screaming that he wants his mommy. This emotional outburst, this desire to be with his parents and to feel their warmth, love, and protection turns out to be exactly what he needs to restore his childhood. Yet another showing of how good we have it as children, when we were protected by our guardians and always have them to turn to in a pinch. Because real growth doesn't come from a wish, it comes from experience, from taking each stage of life seriously, not rushing it, not skipping it, not faking it, but living it fully, honestly and imperfectly. Finally back at his normal self, Timmy gets walked out of Yale by the cops who tell him it's not a place for a kid. Now that he's got his life back, Timmy's never going to take being little for granted again. Is there stuff about being a kid he still doesn't like? Sure, where every stage of life has its struggles. There's no changing in that. But what's important is not to rush forward or look back, but appreciate every day as it comes and embrace what you have. And that's a lesson he's not soon going to forget. In fact, it's a lesson Tim is more than happy to share with all friends at school. Next day, instead of being mad at the bully's insults, Timmy accepts that he's small with a smile and tells him that he's in no hurry to grow up. Because who would want all their hair on their head to go away so it could come out of their butt